It is the low season of 216 AD, and in the resplendent halls of the Parthian city of Arbella, the King of Kings, Artabanus IV, receives a series of embassies from the court of the Imperator of the Romans, Caracalla of the Severan dynasty. The emissaries bring appeals for the two imperial houses to join by way of a spectacular and unprecedented royal marriage, and thus preserve peace between the two great powers of the Levant. Artabanus, who knows that he is at a distinct disadvantage due to the recent civil war between himself and his brother, Vologases VI, as well as Rome's indisputable superiority in resources, would ordinarily welcome such ostensibly fraternal overtures from Parthia's greatest threat and rival. But there are many considerations to the offer which give the ruler pause. You see, Caracalla entered the east by offering assistance in a dispute in the kingdom of Osroene, only to annex it as soon as he crossed the borders with his army. Next, he did the same with the Armenian kingdom. Now he stands at the border of Parthia proper, with Caracalla broadcasting to anyone with ears that he is the new Alexander, back once again to vanquish the world. He is even, as Artabanus understands, converting the Roman legions into the same phalanx formations with which Alexander campaigned, and raising cohorts of Spartans back in Greece. From Artabanus's perspective, the decision now is whether to placate a man who is a delusional maniac, or else to make him a member of the family. The entire fate of the ancient empire of the Persians rests on his choice. Artabanus may be worried about Caracalla's mental state, as well as his known disregard for treaties and honor-bound agreements, but he is also a realist who understands that Caracalla is a very capable military leader, at the head of perhaps the finest war machine in the history of the earth. Caracalla's father, Septimus Severus, had engaged in a highly successful war against the Parthians a generation before, capturing and looting the capital Ctesiphon and wrenching northern Mesopotamia from its domains. Since assassinating his brother Gaeta, Caracalla has completed a number of similarly effective campaigns in various theatres, giving clear signals that he has inherited all of his father's traits and instincts for leadership and martial authority. Thus, Artabanus makes the calculation that there is little to stop Caracalla wreaking havoc on his divided realm, and so he finally gives in and agrees to let the Emperor of Rome marry his daughter. The date is set, and Caracalla crosses the Parthian border at the head of a resplendent army of celebration. After some days' peaceful march, they reach the city of Arbella, and there they are greeted outside its walls by the royal court, a guard of honor, and thousands of Artabanus's subjects and soldiers. The legions form into spectacular lines, and the Parthians stream out to greet them, whole orchestras of musicians and dancers lighting up the already sunlit atmosphere with sound and movement, wine flowing freely, and all offering a hymn of greeting to the newest member of the realm's royal family. The party goes on for some time, and Herodian reports that the Parthians drink heavily and leave their weapons behind, allowing their horses to roam and graze. For this is a celebration that there will be no more war, and peace will continue from this moment forward. Caracalla watches the festivities from a distance, the Parthian King of Kings waiting to greet him, and now seemingly all of the city singing in anticipation of the moment that the two supreme rulers will embrace as kin. Satisfied with the display, Caracalla gives the prearranged order, and the legions move forward, beginning a general massacre. The Parthians are so relaxed and their senses so dulled that at first they do not understand exactly what is taking place. But the lethal efficiency of the legions and the unearthly screams of the dying soon wake them from their stupor. Fast-moving Romans almost capture Artabanus himself, only for a quick-thinking bodyguard to throw the Shah manfully onto a horse and send the animal sprinting back to the city. The rest of the populace, in their fine clothes and with no protection, are easy prey for the armored cohorts and the cavalry, who roam freely and cut them down as they trip over their flowing ceremonial robes. It is an outright disaster for the Parthians, and as soon as Caracalla is satisfied that he has extracted as much blood, booty and slaves from the operation as is possible, he smartly turns the legions about and begins a general plunder of the remaining Parthian portions of Mesopotamia. There are no limits set to the depredations. Everything, even Parthian royal graves, is fair game. The chroniclers report that there is so little resistance to the Roman looting that the legionaries are bored with pillage by the time Caracalla gives the order to return to winter quarters at the end of the season. There, at Edessa, Caracalla rests from his exertions by racing his chariot and battling wild animals, while his generals Marcus Oclitanius Adventus and Marcus Apellius Macrinus look after his military and administrative affairs. Both men are effective officials, with Adventus the better at army logistics, while Macrinus is an expert at clerical duties. Caracalla's obligations are thus in good hands, although he berates and demeans Macrinus for possessing fine tastes, instead of living as a simple soldier as he does. The young emperor is perturbed, however, by the small army of astrologers and diviners he keeps in his court, and he worries that they are not warning him appropriately about potential threats and conspiracies. He thus writes to a well-known soothsayer in Rome, Materianus, and asks him to identify potential threats to his reign. Materianus obligingly sends Caracalla a list of names, the foremost of which is Macrinus. It's likely that there are rumors swirling that Macrinus is dissatisfied with Caracalla's constant belittling of him, in much the same way as Caligula alienated his closest guards and chamberlains almost 2 centuries earlier. But Macrinus, being the emperor's secretary, intercepts and reads the letter advising Caracalla to put him to death. Concealing the message while Caracalla is racing his chariot, Macrinus now needs to act quickly. He enlists a centurion member of the guard named Justin Materialis, whose brother had recently been put to death by Caracalla for an infraction, and convinces him to dispatch the emperor as soon as he has the opportunity. Caracalla himself had aided in this recruitment by continually referring to Materialis as a bit of a Nancy boy, even after he had executed the man's brother. Materialis' opportunity for revenge comes shortly after, when Caracalla decides to have his horoscope read at a temple near Carrhae, the site of Crassus's catastrophe against the Parthians, in which perhaps as many as 7 Roman legions were destroyed. On the road between Edessa and Carrhae, Caracalla stops to relieve himself and waves his mounted escort forward. Seeing that the emperor is alone and in the midst of his micturition, Materialis rushes forward as though Caracalla has summoned him and stabs the emperor under the arm. Caracalla dies immediately, and Materialis' escape is thwarted by the German bodyguard, who murder him quickly. In the confusion of the aftermath, the throne is offered to Adventus, but he refuses on the grounds that he is too old, and so Macrinus is chosen, becoming the first emperor to come from the equestrian class rather than the patrician. Incredibly, it seemed no one was aware that he was behind Caracalla's death. With the backing of the army, Macrinus is elevated to the purple in the field. But as fate would have it, there is a storm on the horizon. Artabanus, the king of kings so brutally and thoroughly deceived and besmirched by Caracalla, has spent the intervening months drawing forces from the outskirts of his empire, and he is now marching at full tilt toward the Roman army, with nothing less than complete revenge on his agenda. There is no doubt that Caracalla would have thrown himself and his men headfirst into such a clash with unbridled joy, but for the decidedly unmilitaristic and still unsteady new emperor Macrinus, this is a calamity. He attempts to send peace offers to Artabanus, omitting the information that Caracalla is dead. But the Persian king of kings, having picked the bones of his ancestors from the dirt where the legions threw them, dismisses him outright. Now, Macrinus must show something approaching the assertiveness of his predecessor, so he marches the army out to meet the Parthians in the field. The first contact comes in the vicinity of Nisibis, in the southern foothills of Mount Massius and the soaring Taurus range. Advance units of both armies clash at a well as the Parthians come off the Mesopotamian plain, and the fast-moving Parthian riders almost overrun the main Roman line, but for the quick actions of some baggage handlers, who charge them and give the appearance of hardened front-line troops. The Parthian cavalry withdraws, and the two armies begin to stabilize and deploy for the coming battle. There are no precise records for the numbers of troops on both sides, but as Caracalla was in the midst of a campaign to subdue the East in its entirety, it is reasonable to assume that Macrinus can call on 7 to 9 legions, or a third of the entire Roman army. Records indicate that there are limited detachments from upwards of a dozen legions originating from across the empire. Similarly, addressing his men, Macrinus explicitly tells them Artabanus has arrived with his entire horde, indicating that they would be facing a truly imperial-sized army, tens of thousands strong. Lacking the trained infantry and relying on what is effectively a feudal levy of cavalry, Parthian armies are generally not as large as Roman forces. The largest Parthian army in Roman records was probably that which fought Mark Antony 300 years earlier, and contained 50,000 men. By contrast, when Caracalla's father Septimus Severus won the rule of the entire Roman Empire at the Battle of Lugdunum, there were 50,000 Roman soldiers on both sides. As the legions line up with heavy infantry in the center and cavalry and javelin men on the wings, those that know their history or have kept their eyes open for memorials will understand that they are now in almost the same place where Crassus lost a similarly sized Roman army more than 250 years earlier. Macrinus is feeling this pressure also, and he watches with trepidation as the Parthian horse archers and cataphracts hove into position. Artabanus has wasted no time in moving against them, appearing before the Romans at dawn. Alongside the horses, there are also dromedaries, war camels that with their riders can move faster than horses and engage in lightning attacks. The Roman command has placed their army in depth, with 3 main lines probable, and there are lighter troops behind the heavier units so as to keep up a solid defensive front, even while on a maneuver and facing fast-moving challenges. This all seems to count for nothing when Artabanus unleashes his horse archers and they ride forward in their thousands, loosing shafts high into the air and bringing them down on the heads of the legions. The Romans return with their own bows, likely making use of the heavier weapons like the scorpion, of which each legion possesses scores, as well as even onagers and ballista. But with their ability to shoot on the move, The Parthian riders have the advantage, and it is a matter of endurance for the oppressed men under the showers of deadly barbs. The Parthians wait until the moment they feel the stationary Romans are compromised, and then the cataphracts and camels move forward. With the legions softened and dispirited, now is the time for vengeance. They will be run from the field in a devastating assertion of Parthian prowess. The animals pound over the open plain, and the Roman front lines hesitate a moment before a movement is detected on their line. The Parthians cry out in triumph. The Romans are retreating. They spur their mounts forward, faster and harder. There is no escape now. The Romans are moving backward in an orderly manner, still facing the Parthians, but there is no hope of them outrunning the cavalry. The Parthians follow their brilliantly coloured flags and spur all the harder. Then, something happens to the fastest riders. Men and animals begin to fall in tens and scores, and finally by the hundreds. But there is no enemy near them, and they are not struck by arrows. Hundreds of horses and camels are stricken before the Parthian chiefs and officers comprehend the cause and howl for the charge to be abandoned. As the Romans stage their withdrawal and move backward, they cover the ground in caltrops, the pointed metal spikes designed in such a way that whichever way they land, they will stick a sharpened arrow tip straight upward. The entire charge is disabled before it even reaches the Roman line. Infuriated, the Parthians stand and watch the now unmoving lines of legionaries. They order another shower of arrows and then a heavy charge once more, but again the Romans withstand the bolts behind the shield wall and retreat, turning the ground in front of them into a minefield for the mounted Parthian force. Those few cataphracts that do manage to engage with the Roman shield wall do so with no momentum and little support, weathering peeler spears flung at them at speed. They are easily dealt with by the legionaries and the light javelin men between their units. Artabanus calls off the attack when the light begins to fail, only to once more take the field the next day. The legionaries again weather the arrows and stand their ground, and yet again the cataphracts and dromedaries push their animals into the excruciating field of torture that the Romans have created. At the close of the second day, the result is still a stalemate. Thousands of Parthians lie dead, and the legions are bruised but intact. The ordeal is costing them also in terms of casualties to the arrows, but they know that they have the better of the fighting. The Parthians will break before they do. The next day, the third of full-force fighting in the open, sees a repeat of the first 2 days, the Romans enduring terrible arrow storms, but the Parthians are unable to make the breakthrough past the legionary shields. So great are the mounds of bodies now that the two sides have difficulty even closing on one another. Artabanus attempts to have rider companies swing round and outflank the legions, but the Romans extend their line, careful to keep the front intact by way of the lighter units. And in this way the flanks close themselves off to any venture that will attack from 2 directions at once. Roman tactics have now evolved to the point where there will be no repeat of Crassus's Holocaust at Carrhae. At this point, seeing that Artabanus is at the breaking, Macrinus sends a herald and informs the King of Kings that Caracalla is dead. There is no further need for revenge, and the new emperor will pay compensation to the Parthians for the damage caused by his predecessor's betrayal. Likely relieved in the extreme to not only be given a pretext to withdrawal, but also 200 million sesterces in tribute, Artabanus calls off the attack and Macrinus is glad also to end the fighting, and thus free himself to balance matters in the upended empire. But the legionaries who have fought for 3 days only to see their victory snatched away are not content, however. Roman soldiers take a dim view of weakness on the part of their leaders, and any satisfaction Macrinus may have at his cleverness is incredibly misplaced. From this point forward, his fate is sealed. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and you get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. You can also show your support by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to my channel as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, I'll see you in the next one.